There's a lot of talks here on really, really tactical things. And right now, I'm not going to give you, one weird trick to double your conversion rate or anything like that. But I'm going to talk about the things that really made a difference for me over the long term. So we'll just jump right in. If you want to get good at something, what's the best way to do that? Practice? Yeah. Like practice sometimes. Practice for a few hours a day, 1 day a week. Maybe work on your product a couple times a month when you get inspired and you have all that motivation. I don't think so. And we'll get into that. But there's this idea that if you want to get really good at something, you should practice it continually. And so Jason Fried of 37 Signals, or Basecamp now, has this idea that just like you would learn to play the drums by practicing, you would learn to make money by practicing. That it's a skill. The more you do it, the better you get. So he has this story of the first time he got someone he didn't know to pay him money. And I think that is truly a critical moment in any person's career of selling things. So he created this product, and I heard this story on Justin Jackson's Product People podcast. So Jason talks about how his very first product was an app he made with FileMaker Pro to help people organize their music collections. And he put up put it up on a shareware site, had a little README file that said, hey, if you like this, send me $20. Here's my parents' address. And one day, he got in the mail a letter, an envelope from Germany with $20 and a printout of that README file. And he talks about this as being an absolutely pivotal moment for him when he got someone that he did not know at all and had no connection to pay him money. So what we have to do is you have to start practicing making money. Jason didn't start out with any of the big products that we know him for now. He actually had a lot of things in between audiophile and what we know him for. So I went through a very similar process, and I'll show you some of my first products. I'm not going to go quite the full embarrassing side and show you all the screenshots. I'll just show you the names. So here's a few of my products that have made less than $1,000. I tried to get into the WordPress theme business with Legend Themes, hosting an iPhone app. I think everybody should make like a flashcards iPhone app at some point. I think that's a requirement if you sell on the App Store. And so this was me learning, and it took a long time. I had a couple more apps, that made in the several $1,000 range. Commit I still have. And then, I'm just working up, making bigger and bigger apps. And, I get into selling other books. So this is my getting into what I consider successful products. And then I have a couple books that have sold really quite a bit. But overall, I have had really a lot of products. So this is all practice. Later on, those products are starting to make meaningful amounts of money, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000. But it took me quite a while to get to that point. So because I share numbers and talk about the blogging side, or I blog about all of that and am public with everything, one thing that I hear all the time is, oh, it's great that, you worked on this book and you were an overnight success because of it. And what people never see is just all the products that completely fail. And so if you graph my product revenue over, I actually started working on products in 2007, but 0 didn't look very good on this graph. So I actually had a little product revenue in 2008. And so you can see that it took me quite a while to actually make any kind of money at all. So you have to start somewhere. You have to start practicing. And you have to build up that skill of making money. At MicroConf in Europe this last fall, I had coffee with some of these guys. And this team their company is called Source, and they make a Photoshop plugin called CSS Hat. I don't know if any of you have used it. It's really, really good if you're a designer or a developer and you want to get code, quickly, your Photoshop styles out of Photoshop and into code. And so what these guys did when they're all, just barely out of high school, or some of them were still in high school, they did a startup weekend. And through that process, they built CSS Hat, their Photoshop plugin, which if you think about it, a Photoshop plugin is a really small product. They built that in a weekend, they started selling it, and they've done really, really well. When they launched it, they made, I think it was $10,000 in the first day or so. And it was quite successful, but they started with a small product. They could have tried to jump right into SaaS. They could have tried to jump right into something that would require a lot of support or take a long time to build. But they got something small out there, and they started working from there. Here's a screenshot of CSS Hat. So there's so many businesses that you can get into that don't require a lot of time. Maybe it's not the SaaS app or the perfect business that you want to be building down the road, but you need to know that you have to start small and practice making money, get all of those small wins, learn how to get people who you don't know or who don't know you, how to get them to pay you money, and build from there. So the next thing, and when I figured out this lesson, it was really quite a turning point for me. But if we look back to my very first products, I had the problem that I had was, how do you get customers to know and care about your product or what you're selling? Even to know that you exist, let alone convince them that you're someone worth buying from. And so probably those first 3 years that I represented in that graph, that was all before I figured this out. And I got the answer to this question from a bunch of different sources all at once, and that's when it finally set in. But the biggest one is from a gentleman by the name of Chris Coyier. And who knows about CSS tricks? Anybody been to csstricks.com? Quite a few people. So if you want to learn web design, it's a great place to go. I really enjoyed Chris's site. But when he started it back in, I think 2006 to 2007, I was a web designer at the time. I considered myself decent at CSS. And I remember reading the first articles that he put out and kind of thinking, oh, that's cool, but I already knew it. And he would put out more articles, and I would kind of thought, he's not that much of an expert because I already know what he's talking about. It was a little arrogant. But he keeps writing articles, and basically what happens is we're both learning new things. I'm working a mix of freelance and like full-time web design jobs. He's doing the same thing. We keep learning. And as I learn something new, I apply it on the next project. As Chris learns something new, he writes about it and applies it on the next project and keeps going. And I didn't really think anything of this until Chris launched a Kickstarter campaign. And what he said is, I want to redesign my website. So I want to take a little time off from my work and redesign csstricks.com. I think to live during, to survive during that time, I need about $3,500. So if you guys, my dear audience, will be kind enough to, put up that much money in a Kickstarter campaign, I'll redesign the site and I'll create some tutorials along the way and teach about this whole process. So Chris goes on to raise $89,697, a little above his $3,500 goal. And I saw this and went, wait, what? Remember, we're both designers. We've been improving at the same rate. We have the same skill level. We're both now advanced CSS coders, I guess. So what was different between what was going on? It clearly wasn't skill level. And what it came back to is that when Chris was teaching, I was just working. I was just implementing what I was doing. And I know so many people who are doing really, really impressive things now that you never hear about because they either don't think they're enough of an expert to share it, or maybe they don't care about that kind of thing. But really, all you do, and all Chris did, was he learned something new and put it out there. And he wasn't, I guess what you consider an expert in that area would be someone working on the CSS spec, or working in those meetings in the working group, or working for a browser or something like that. And that wasn't Chris at all. He was just somebody who knew something and started sharing it, and that turned into a huge amount of revenue for him. So Jason Fried has the same idea that he talks about, where he says, emulate chefs. You have all these secrets. For chefs, it's their recipes. That's what they put together, what they craft and perfect. And most people keep those entirely secret. There's probably a bunch of people here who would be like, I'd tell you those numbers, but I don't know. They're trying to keep their businesses secrets to themselves. They don't want their competitors stealing things. Chefs, on the other hand, the ones you've heard of, say, take everything. I'm not just going to tell you my recipes. I'm going to write them down, and you can buy them for $20. And that's their craft. That's what they've perfected over the years, and they're basically giving it away. And they go a step further than that and say, let me bring in cameras. We'll get in a studio, and you can look over my shoulder, and you can see exactly what I'm doing and how I make this. And so those chefs aren't worried that people are going to take their secret recipes that are now public and open a restaurant across the street and put them out of business. Instead, they know that by putting out all of that information, by being public about it, they're going to get more people to come to them. They're going to have more fans. The restaurants are going to be booked out weeks or months in advance instead of feeling desperate to try to get more people. So a huge realization for me is that people don't teach because they're experts. They become experts through teaching. So Chris Coyier did not start as an expert. He became an expert over time. He built an audience. And that's how he was able to have such a successful Kickstarter campaign. His audience was just thrilled to pay him the moment he gave them an opportunity to. And as far as giving away secrets, like chefs do, I think of a handful of companies that, there's lots of companies that teach, but then there's a few companies, like I'm thinking of Buffer, where they'll tell you everything. They'll go much further and they'll say, here's exactly how much all of our team members make. You can go view the Google Doc and you'll see there's 60 other people viewing this Google Doc right now of exactly how their customer support person, whatever her name is, how her salary gets calculated based on everything. And it's fascinating that they're willing to give away these levels of secrets. So there's lots of people in this room, like Ruben from BidSketch, Heaton at Kissmetrics, who understand that teaching is a fantastic way to draw in an audience, to get people to trust you. And then to take it further, like Buffer, Josh is sharing all of his numbers, being totally public about it. And that's something that his audience, really, really loves, and that's going to get a lot of attention and make him really a lot of money over time. So, like I said earlier, I kind of got these lessons from multiple places at the same time. I'd read Jason saying, emulate chefs. And, I'd heard it, that you should be teaching and sharing, and I'd seen so many examples, but it wasn't really until I saw Chris and his Kickstarter campaign and had all these come together and happen at once that I realized, oh, that's what's going on. And from then on, I became determined to just teach everything I know. And so you look at people who are teaching, and they're, they don't necessarily have the most revenue, but they're willing to learn new things every day, and they're willing to share it. And so I'd really, really encourage you to be much more open, much more public, and I think you'll see fantastic results from it. So there's a problem that I see a lot in the bootstrapping space. And it comes back to, there's this guy I know back in Boise, and I've known him for quite a while, and he's had this idea for a product. And he's been working on it for a while. Actually, he's been working on it for a long while. It's his side project. He's got a great software development job. He's paid really well. He's quite comfortable. But he's been working on this idea for 7 years. And being a developer, he was able to write the entire thing himself. He built it out. And then he's been improving it. It's not quite ready for customers yet. He's making some progress. He's talked to a few customers, getting there. That's taken a couple of years. And then he got to the point where, you know what? That code base is getting a little bit old. I could write some of those things better now. You know what? There's this great new library. Let's rewrite it with that. So as sad as it is, he's been working on this one product for 7 years. And it's so easy to have ideas and to have things that you're working towards, and you totally underestimate how much work they are to get done. And so you just, you run the risk of becoming that person who always talks about his ideas, talks about the company he's going to build, the side project that he's going to run, and without ever making it happen. So there's a way around that. But first, I think there's a few people in here who have read my blog. So can anyone tell me the name of my first book? Anybody? Okay. So it is, the first book that I published is called the App Design Handbook. And it's about designing iPhone applications. But it's actually the third book that I started writing. So what were the first two books? And that doesn't really matter what they were. What matters is that they never got finished. In fact, they never got past an outline and a couple pages. Because I really wanted to write a book, and I thought those first two ideas were really good. But what would happen is I would work on it when I was really motivated. So I'd get excited, I'd write out the outline, and I'd start writing the book, and I'd take a break to do something else for a little bit, and I'd come back to it, and I'd be a little less excited, but I'd get, another page written. And then my motivation would just kind of die out. And it wasn't until I learned this much more valuable skill that I actually made any progress. But it was from a gentleman by the name of Chris Guillebeau. And he said something that really stood out to me. He said, I can write a book every year, 100 plus blog posts, 50 or so guest posts, at least 2 to 3 business projects. And when he says business projects, he generally means actually more full-length books. And a few long-form essays or magazine pieces. And he's talking like writing for, CNN for their travel section, and writing all this stuff. And he says, it's not too hard. I can do all this in a year. The people who say it takes years to write a book, Chris is like, I can write a whole bunch in a year. And the way he said he does it is he just writes 1,000 words a day. So instead of instead of working for huge amounts of time and putting in, amazing amounts of effort, he breaks it down and makes slow, consistent progress every day. So I adopted this idea because I really wanted to finish the App Design Handbook. I was tired of being that person who talked about ideas and talked about the book he was going to write, the products I was going to make, and never actually finished it. I'm sure you guys know, someone back from high school or college who had all those big plans who never executed on any of them. And I did not want to be that person. So I took Chris's idea and I started writing 1,000 words a day. Well, actually, like any good software person, I first built an app to help me write 1,000 words a day, and then got to actually writing it. So this app is Commit, and I wrote that first book. It took me a little while to get a habit going, but wrote 1,000 words a day. After the first book, I finished that and thought, great, that was a success. And the next day my phone pops up and says, "Were you going to write 1,000 words today?" I thought, no. I finished the book. That was the goal. You know, I shipped something. That was important to me. And then I thought, you know what, there's no way I'm going to break a streak of, at that time it was about 75 days in a row. So I kept writing and I wrote another book. And I kept writing and wrote another book. And I wrote a whole bunch of blog posts, and now I guess I'm stuck. Like at this point I have 600 days in a row, or it's 620 I think now. And so I guess I'm just never going to stop writing 1,000 words a day. But it goes back to that teaching. For me, writing, I can put out all those ideas, I can teach, and my reach grows from that a lot more. But Joel Spolsky has this idea where, you know, he's applying the same concept to software, where he's talking about just making a little bit of progress every day. That the idea that your product should be better at the end of the day than it was at the beginning. Even if it was a tiny little bit of improvement, you've made progress. And so when you're willing to do that, when you're willing to put in that time and that really consistent effort, really impressive things can happen. So someone else that I really like, his name is John Lee Dumas, and he has a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. And the remarkable thing that he's done is he's published a podcast episode every day, 7 days a week, I think for 550 days in a row. And he's seen amazing business growth because he's willing to put in that consistent effort and put things out so often. For my own app, ConvertKit, things really, for a while, really stalled out and got, you know, revenue wasn't growing, the product wasn't improving, and I found, you know, that decreased my motivation even more. But what I realized is that I was working on it when I was motivated. And so when I started to see things improve again, you know, I started to see revenue increase, I started to see more progress, was when I decided that, you know what, I'm just going to make the product a little bit better every day. I'm not going to wait until I have time to sit down and, you know, code out an entirely new feature or redesign the screen to make progress. I'm going to, at a minimum, every day, make something a little bit better, and I'm going to slowly chip away at this. Because, to be honest, making products is really hard. It's a skill, like making money, that we get better at over time. But you need to make that consistent progress in order to see the benefit long term. So the next one is something else that I see a lot kind of in our world. And that comes from the quest for passive income. And when people think, okay, I'm gonna get passive income, or I'm gonna build this business, or, you know, I'm just trying to get the $6,000 a month it takes to replace my job. What they tend to do is, and I did this, is that you come up with some interesting niche and you build a little product and you get it to the point where it's making $500 or $1,000 a month, and then you go, cool, that's there. Now we're going to go all the way over here, and we're going to go to some other interesting little niche that has a little painful problem that we can solve. We're going to build that up, and that's going to get to $2,000 a month in revenue. Maybe it could get bigger, but now I have another idea, and I'm going to go to this other, you know, interesting niche that I can find, and I'm going to build up another product. And the idea is that if this one's making 1,000, this one's making 2,000, this one's making, you know, 2,000 or 3,000 as well, that great, you can replace your, you've replaced your day job, you can quit and work on your product business full time. I don't like that model at all, actually. I think that it prevents you from building something really great. Because any work that you put into focusing on this little niche over here and you making this product better is not helping you sell this one over here. They're completely separate silos. So I say now, I don't like that model, but I did it like I think many people in this room. And I ended up with a whole bunch of products that had totally different audiences and didn't have much overlap. So just as a little exercise, I laid them out kind of as a Venn diagram where you think of each circle for a product represents the audience. The more they overlap, the more overlap there is in that audience. So here's a little graphic. There's some overlap between my two books because they're both about design. My other book, Authority, is about writing and marketing books, and so there's a little bit of overlap there. Then I had this iPad application, One Voice, which was really for speech-language pathologists. And then I had this other SaaS application that was for sign language interpreting agencies. And any work that I put into, the SaaS application did not help the iPhone app sell. They all made money, but it was really a pain to make progress on it because they didn't benefit each other in any way. So I actually killed off everything that wasn't fairly closely overlapping. And so I don't have a single audience now, but I have two that overlap. So I like to talk about two things. I like to talk about design and marketing. And so I ran some numbers on my email list. I have an email list of about 17,000 people. And so I tagged everybody as they came in based on what interests they had. And so sometimes when I come out with a product or a blog post, if it's pretty design heavy, I'll just send it to the people who are interested in design, or vice versa. I'll just send something that's more marketing focused. So there's about 10 or 11,000 people on the design side, and there's about 8,000 people, maybe 9,000 people on the marketing side. And what you'll notice is that those two numbers add up to more than 17,000. And so that difference is there's about an overlap between the two groups of about 3,000 people who exist in both groups. So the work that I put into promoting a design book does help promote the other products. And in the same way I can talk about the sales, the sales or results from a launch, teach and share that information, and it does benefit my other products. And that's really helpful. So what you can think about, ideally, is having a single audience where you have different products at different price points that all serve within that audience. So maybe the outside circle is your email list. An inner circle would be a book. Getting further in from that could be a SaaS application that's for even fewer people. And then even in from that could be an expensive training course. Brennan Dunn is a fantastic example of this. His entire audience is targeting freelancers, and he has the whole range from the free email course to the $1,800 workshop with a SaaS app in there and everything else. Someone else that I really like, his name's Shawn McAbee, and you can kind of see it in the background a little bit, but he does this fantastic hand lettering and illustration work. And so he's been creating that for a while. And he has effectively 3 different products or categories of products. Everything on his site is focused on design, but he started out with a store, which is in the middle. So he'd make these great illustrations and these clever posters, and he'd sell them in a store, and that makes some amount of money. And then for the designers in his community, or reading his blog, he created a private community where they can pay, I think $15 a month and get some of his time, have a place to gather, and all of that. That's still targeted at the same audience. And then most recently, he launched a course called Learn Lettering that actually made $100,000 in its first week, which was really impressive. But all of these things are focused on the same audience. So he's able to have a suite of products, and he's able to build multiple things. He's not, as some people might think of it, stuck working on one thing for a long time. He's able to experiment, try out, because building new products is fun. But Shawn keeps it all targeted within that same audience. So that any work he puts into promoting his store is also going to somewhat help benefit his course or his community. Going back to these guys, the Vu and the team behind Source and the Photoshop plugins, they didn't stop with just CSS Hat, their first plugin, and they didn't switch to an entirely different market with their next thing. Instead, they focused on designers, people who want design tools, and they made more Photoshop plugins. And they've gotten into training and other things. Now they have a suite of products. They can cross-sell. They're running an impressive business now, and they're doing it all by focusing on one audience. So the habits that have helped me to build a product empire are, first, to start small, practice making money, make consistent progress each day, serve a single audience, and to teach everything you know. So that's it for my talk. Thank you, guys.
Hi, Nathan.
Hey.
So do you build a landing page first to check the demand for the book that you're about to write and then make a decision, or you just write away anyways?
So I see two different ways to validate a product. They both have their advantages. The easy way, and they're both great ways to go. The easy way is to put up a landing page, drive as much traffic to it as possible, and ask for an email address. And then you can make assumptions based on quality of traffic and that kind of thing. And you can make a guess, okay, maybe 1 out of every 20 people who puts in an email address is going to purchase. Okay, there's interest. That's great. And that's what I typically do for a book. Now, something bigger, like when I went to make ConvertKit, which is a SaaS application, if that goes wrong, there's a lot more money and time on the line than there is for a book. And so in that case, I did pre-orders. And I think that's the ultimate validation, where you ask people, will you pay for this? And if you can't get people to pay for a product before it exists, when you're like pitching them one-on-one, you really got to work on finding a market, a different market, or reconsider building that product entirely. So I would say, yeah, a landing page for every product, collecting email addresses. Do that no matter what. And that's one way to validate. The other way is to ask people to pay you money.
Hey, Nathan, my name is Gazim.
Hey.
I'm just wondering, in terms of being open, did you start being open once you were targeting more the entrepreneurial community and found that they value that? Or was that something that you would advise in other industries?
It definitely works in other industries. But this is something I struggled with for a while. And Jason Fried and I were actually talking about this at one point. And I have a video somewhere where he's like, you can tell he's frustrated in the conversation because I'm just not getting it. Because I keep thinking, like, kind of along the lines of your question, like, well, that works. Basically what I was saying to him is, you guys can talk about how you build Basecamp and all of that because you're targeting web designers. And he keeps coming back, he's like, we're not just targeting web designers. We're targeting, all small businesses. And then he was referencing, the articles that he writes for Inc. magazine and all these other things. And so he came up with a bunch of examples as to how their teaching and sharing is drawing in a big audience. But it's definitely true where you can have an audience that you have nothing to teach them. And I ran into that problem with my iPad app that was for speech-language pathologists. I have nothing to teach speech-language pathologists. And so if teaching is a marketing method that you want to try, and I think you really should, then you should definitely consider going after a market that you're a member of. So if you're, and this is just fantastic for long-term caring about your audience and all of that. But I'm a designer and I sell a lot of my products to designers. I'm an entrepreneur and I sell products to entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of range in that. But if you list out all of your own characteristics, and that could range from everything to the ones I mentioned. I could also add things in. I'm a father, a husband, a snowboarder. There's a lot of attributes that you have where you could choose any one of those and target an audience that you're a member of. And if you do that, it's way easier to teach.
Thanks. If you haven't made your first dollar yet, do you think it's better to focus more on validation of a quote unquote good idea, or if you can just get something out within a couple of days that might make $20, which approach is better? To do it right and follow the validation, the kind of stuff, and start small, stay small, or just to get something out there and try to get someone to buy it for $1 or whatever?
Well, if we're taking the advice from anybody, like all the people who pitched me their product ideas back when I did web design, you should build like a big marketplace first. I think it's good to start small, but you don't want to work on something that you don't care about or have any interest in. So if you think if it's a problem that you want to solve and you can get it out quickly, I think that's good. I talked about all the early products that I had that didn't make it anywhere. You could put a big practice label all over all of those. That was me practicing making money. I cared about all of them. I thought all of them could be the thing that carried me for a long time, and they just eventually fizzled out. It's hard to know, but I would balance it based on how long it's going to take you to make that first dollar. If your big idea is going to take you a year before you think you can make any money off of it, and you're not experienced, I would stay away from it. Go with something like an iPhone app, a WordPress theme, a Photoshop plugin, something where there's an existing ecosystem that you can sell into. You can sell on a marketplace, and it's much easier for you.
So with regards to breaking the streak and the commit, like what do you do if you get really sick or your wife is giving birth or something like that? Or do you just break the streak and start over?
So I've been a little bit flexible with it, where writing 1,000 words for every day. So sometimes things have happened where I've missed a day. So I just write 2,000 words the next day. And if I go on vacation, usually what happens is I'll do a little bit while on vacation because I like it, but I'll build up in advance. And so I'm like quite a bit ahead, and then usually I'll be maybe a day or two behind by the time I get home, and then I'll catch up. The great thing about making rules like this and your own habits and that kind of thing is that it's your thing, so you can do it how you want and make the rules as flexible as you want. The important thing is that you just keep making progress.
I've been writing for the last couple months, and I found that I do a lot of editing for the stuff I write. So do you write 1,000 words and then you spend a couple hours editing? How's your edit cycle work?
For me, if I do a lot of editing, that can count as my writing for the day, like really a lot of editing, because editing is a painful process. And it's another thing, if it's your rule, then, or your habit, you can make the rules. So, whatever works for you. If you want editing to count, it's great. I did a video course for Photoshop design, and so I, did a whole ton of recording videos, and that counted. So I get to make the rules. So anyway.
Thanks again, Nathan.
Thank you.